The story begins with a person wearing a special armor suit, engaged in battle against monsters who appear to outnumber and overpower the humans, causing great concern. Holding their heavy ammunition, they opened fire on the monsters, resulting in the demise of many of them. However, suddenly a brilliant light emanates from the monster's core, revealing a colossal dragon emerging from within, leaving the person utterly shocked. Recognizing the impossibility of defeating this creature, the person drops their weapon and sits on the ground. Approaching closer, the dragon exhales a formidable flame, engulfing the individual and causing their armor to get destroyed. This subjects them to intense agony, leaving their comrade in shock. Sitting in his office, the comrade holds his head in disappointment, realizing that the haunting nightmare from the past is returned. Suddenly a realization dawns on him, and he thinks that it's the day when the last batch of recruits is supposed to arrive. Just then a few helicopters descend upon ARC, the renowned Psycho Association. In one of the helicopters sits a 10-year-old child named Lee Han, hailing from a humble background but displaying exceptional talent. He recalls the astonishment of the army official who encountered him as the leader of a criminal group called the War Orphan Group at such a young age. The official, recognizing Han's remarkable abilities, deemed him highly valuable, and instead of sending him to jail, he decided to send him to ARC. Curious if he was one of those psychic superhumans, Han asked the official. In response, the official revealed that he was not an ordinary individual but someone who could potentially become humanity's savior. The official explained that Hem would enjoy all the luxuries of life at ARC. However, Han raised a concern, stating that he would be the only one enjoying those luxuries while his younger siblings would not. Therefore, he requested that the organization take responsibility for his younger siblings' welfare, including food, clothing, shelter, and education, if they wanted him to join ARC. After some contemplation, the army official agreed, promising to shoulder all the responsibilities of Han's younger siblings as long as he remained at ARC. Recalling this, Han stands up from his seat as the helicopter prepares to land. Finally, the helicopter touches the ground and the door swings open. As Han gazes at the association before him, he remembers the army official's words about his abilities not being of the highest rank, and that he will need to work hard to survive. As he steps out of the helicopter and walks toward the building, determined to prove himself, he suddenly hears a commotion behind him. Turning around, he finds a crowd of children gathered around someone. In the midst of the crowd stands a boy tormenting a young child, asserting that he lacks any ability and was brought there against his will. He blames the new recruits like the child for being treated equal to him and finds it disgusting. In response, the other children in the crowd begin to shout, protesting his remarks. Seething with anger, he charges his hands with his power and lifts rocks from the ground, showcasing his psychic abilities as a result of his training. Witnessing the rocks floating in the air, the children are astonished, as it's their first time witnessing a psychic ability. Holding a stone, the boy turns to the child on the ground, stating that he'll be sent home if injured and asserting that ARC is no place for someone like him to survive. He implies that the child will be grateful to him in the future and sends the stone in his direction. However, just before it can hit the child, Han arrives and catches it, remarking on its slow speed, leaving the child astonished. Surprised by Han's ability to block the stone, the boy inquires about his identity. In response, Han states that he is his etiquette teacher and tosses the stone to the ground. Shortly after, a physical confrontation between the two begins, attracting the attention of the other children, who enjoy the spectacle and cheer Han on. Approaching them, a muscular army official shouts loudly, causing them to turn and see him advancing. With an angry expression on his face, the person instructs both Han and the other boy to step forward. Annoyed by their fighting amongst each other, the soldier asks for their names. In response, the boy introduces himself as Del Simon, and Han also introduces himself. Looking at Del following the proper code of conduct of the association, the soldier remarks that he seems to have received his training and asks if his ability is manifested. In response, he states that he can only use telekinesis so far, while Han watches them with confusion, unable to understand the jargon they use. Hearing Del's reply, the soldier punches him in the stomach so hard, causing him to experience intense pain, and asks why he was trying to act arrogant with only this level of abilities. While Han is in shock, the soldier turns to him, stating that he liked the fact that he stood up for the weak. However, even then he punches Han forcefully, stating that if he is not even as capable as Del, he is useless. As Han crashes to the ground, the soldier turns to the other children, stating that they will become first year soon, and if they are unable to use telekinesis by then, they will be expelled. With that, the person introduces himself as John Red, stating that he is their instructor and will be training them to transform them into psychic warriors capable of fighting dragons. Stating that they should start right away, John instructs them to run laps around the training ground until he stops them and tells them to start running. After some time, while the children keep on running, Han seems pretty comfortable, thinking that he is used to such activities. Meanwhile, various other children start falling to the ground, having lost all their stamina, causing their instructor to expel them one by one. Watching the children get expelled, Han thinks that he can endure tough training but is worried about his psychic abilities. Meanwhile, Del, who is running at a distance from him, wonders if he will be able to display the same level of ability as Han did. Meanwhile, the child who was being bullied by Del also loses all this stamina and falls to the ground with tears welling up in his eyes. Watching him lying on the ground, John comes to him telling him to go home and rest if he cannot endure such tough training, causing him to become disappointed. Just then Han comes to him and helps him get up, stating that he cannot go home like that since he has not given up, and turns to the child asking if it is not the case, and he agrees. Hearing that, the soldier becomes silent, while Han helps the boy proceed forward, giving him a shoulder. After some time, the soldier tells them to stop, causing them all to crash to the ground, badly exhausted. Counting them again, the soldier states that they were originally 73, out of which only 40 are left after the trial. Stating that this is all for that day, the soldier tells them that they will start the real training the next day, in which they will have to run the same number of laps as they did every morning. Hearing that, all of the children except Han become shocked. The next day, at 5 o'clock in the morning, John starts the training, making the children run once again, with Del and Han leading them while competing with each other. At 8 o'clock a.m. they are given their breakfast, 1 hour after which they go to attend their lecture. After attending the lecture with interest, Han goes to the mess with the other children and receives his lunch. Taking the lunch from the counter, he goes to Kiro, the boy he helped, and states that they should eat together. In response, Kiro smiles, while Han thinks that he is his first friend in Ark as well as in life. While they are busy talking, Del comes from behind holding his tray and gives a cold gaze to Han, causing him to reciprocate the same. While Del moves on to the other children, Kiro reveals that he is a child who received a gifted education in the United Kingdom. Although he does not want to admit it, Han states that Del is a child who can use all the abilities and expresses the need for them to learn telekinesis within 3 weeks. In response, Kiro reveals that he can already use telekinesis, making Han astonished. After having their afternoon lectures, combat training, and evening run, they have their dinner, showers, and attendance and go to the dormitory for rest. Lying on his bed, Han tries to fall asleep but is unable to do so, despite this place being incomparably nicer than the one he used to live in. He misses his home and wants to go back but dismisses the idea, thinking that he cannot be so weak. After 2 weeks, a lot of children become capable of using telekinesis, but Han cannot perform it no matter how hard he tries. Anxious about what to do, Han realizes that there is only one person who can help him in that matter, which is Del. The next day, while Del is sitting with his friend, Han comes to him, causing him to laugh, rudely asking what is the case. In response, Han states that he is already aware of it, causing him to laugh, remarking that he is standing a little too tall for making a request and should be a little respectful. Despite feeling enraged at that, Han thinks that his pride is not something important at the moment and gets on his knees, making Del surprised. In a respectful tone, Han then requests that he teach him the telekinesis method, causing him to stay silent in response for a while, before telling him to get up, stating that he should not complain about his methods. Later, Del asks his friend to give him a pencil. Taking the pencil, Del goes straight to Han and pierces it in his heart, causing him to become shocked at this unexpected act. The following day, John gazes out of his window while smoking a cigarette, realizing that it's already the day of the incorporation ceremony. While he is lost in thought, someone unexpectedly opens the door and enters, calling out to him. Turning around, John recognizes the person as Octo, one of his colleagues. Octo, looking at John smoking a cigarette, feels disgusted, which annoys John in return. Taking a seat, Octo inquires about his new recruits, but John responds that all of them seem useless, surprising Octo, stating that there are only 2 of them who seem useful. John reveals the first one to be Del, who despite having a crass personality has power beyond the level of a first-year student. Upon hearing this, Octo identifies Del as a student from the Royal Psyker institution in the United Kingdom and expresses high expectations for him. John then recalls the other recruit Han describing him as an honorable kid with superior mental qualities compared to the rest. Although John regards Han as strong as a soldier, he emphasizes that Han is merely human and not a superhuman, and if he cannot use psychic powers he cannot stay there. Hearing that, Octo changes the subject, asking if John knows what the kids call him, and he agrees, stating that it must be some weird name, causing him to smile in response. Sometime later, John stands before the rows of students announcing their imminent entry into the first year, but clarifying that it only applies to those ready to become psykers. Hearing this, Kiro looks nervously at Han, knowing he still can't use telekinesis. Meanwhile, John explains that their test will be based on outer manifestation, explaining that those who can use the ability of telekinesis can remain and the rest can leave. John points to Octo, instructing those with telekinesis abilities to line up in front of him and directing those without abilities to the personnel and a helicopter on standby to take them home. Among the personnel, Han spots Major Kong, the person responsible for sending him to Ark while looking after his younger siblings. Meanwhile, John urges the children to hurry and move in their respective directions, causing some to excitedly run towards the technician while others sadly approached the helicopters. While Han stands still among them, Kiro calls out to him anxiously. Hearing his voice, Han closes his eyes and puts his hand on his heart, remembering how Del pierced a pencil into his heart, and he's shocked by this sudden unexpected act. Han crashed to the ground and held his heart, asking if it was not similar to an attempt to kill him. Holding the blood-stained pencil in his hand, Del assured him that it was not a deep wound, telling him not to worry and to focus better. With some pain, he revealed that this injury would become his psychic channel. Leaving Han surprised, Del explained that he could imagine pulling out his psychic energy through that injury, which is not something he could do by just grasping his chest for days on end. With that, he moved back to his friend while Han looked at him with astonishment, realizing that Del was aware of the fact that his core was at his heart. Remembering that, hand holds his heart tightly, thinking that he is now able to feel the psychic energy, but becomes confused about how to pull it out. While he is thinking, John calls out to him, stating that he is the only one left and telling him to quickly move. Ignoring the call, Han stands there with his eyes closed, trying to figure out how to access his psychic energy, causing Kiro to become increasingly anxious. Growing enraged by Han's disregard for orders, John angrily approaches him, causing the other students to watch in fear. Reaching near him, John states that the orders of a superior for a soldier are absolute and raises his hand in the air in order to launch a punch, stating that there are no exceptions. Watching that, Han becomes anxious, thinking that he really needs to do something, when he suddenly notices a pen in John's pocket. Just then, John launches a forceful punch at him, causing him to crash to the ground at a distance. Thinking that has no other choice but to do that, Han looks at the pen he managed to take out of John's pocket. While John and other children watching confusion, he pierces the pen into his heart, thinking that he will need to make the deeper to pull out more energy. Watching that, John angrily grabs him from his clothes, asking if he has a death wish. Dropping down the pen after getting a deep wound on his body, Han is unable to channel his energy, causing him to become disappointed and lower his head. See psychic energy in his eyes. Taking a side, John remarks that he has never seen someone as untalented as him and drops him on the ground, moving away. After walking a few steps, he turns around again, congratulating Han, which makes him confused. Having been allowed to enter the first year, Han gets up and moves toward the line of telekinesis ability users while Kiro runs to him asking if he is all right, and he agrees. Octo, who is standing at a distance, gives him a wristwatch, stating that it is a token of passing, making him confused. Looking at the watch, Han realizes that it is the bracelet terminal with his number and arc state-of-the-art technology, and wearing it will complete his registration automatically. Thinking all that, he remarks that it is incredible, and Octo agrees, stating that it has many different functions. Just then, John calls out to all of them, stating that the class allocation will soon be complete and telling them to gather in their classes after checking it. He explains that each grade in ARC is split into 4 classes from A to D, based on abilities. The allocations were made based on the results of the 3-week training, but they can always advance to the next grade or class if they are skilled enough. Congratulating the remaining 25 students, John states that they must have thought of him as a weird person up until now. However, stating that they were wrong about that, John reveals that he is even weirder than their thoughts. With that, the children are divided into the 4 classes, with Del being the only one in Class A. while Kiro gets the B class along with 4 other children. Stating that these 5 people will follow him, he divides the remaining 20 students into classes C and D, with Han attaining the D class. John then tells them that the instructor for these 20 people is going to be Wei Chen and points to a muscular person standing beside him, causing the children to become scared of this huge figure. However, just then Wei Chen smiles and introduces himself as a weapon art instructor, stating that they will surely be doing their best with each other's collaboration. Hearing his encouraging words, the children become surprised, realizing that he is a gentle person in contrast to what they were expecting. With that, John instructs his students to start moving, causing them to line up and begin walking. While walking away, Del comes across Han, who stands still looking at him, but he moves on without saying anything. Following him is Kiro, who looks at Han with a sad expression on his face. Looking at how worried he is, Han tells him not to feel this way, assuring him that he will soon come to his class, causing him to smile and confidently move away. As the students of classes A and B leave, Wei Chen turns to his own students, stating that they should go to the gym. After some time at the gym, Wei Chen holds a huge stick and swings it with swift precision, showing his astonishing acrobatic moves, which leave the children amazed. After showing them his skills, he states that they must be curious about why they are learning to use weapons to face a dragon, and explains that it is because they need to use psychic equipment. He reveals that no material on Earth contains psychic energy, but a dragon skin or bone can contain this energy and transmit it. He explains that this is the reason why weapons made of dragons can inflict serious injuries on dragons. Hearing Han asked how they used to defeat the dragons when this equipment did not exist. In response, Wei Chen reveals that they used to throw bodies at the dragons at that time, which caused them to lose hundreds of psykers to a single dragon. He explains that there are also psykers who attack and support from a long distance. But in order to kill one must use a melee weapon. This is because they need to plunge the weapon into its vital point and release energy. He reveals that the type of psyker who performs this role is known as a striker, causing them to astonished. Pointing to a stand behind him, he states that all of them need to choose their weapons that day. Hearing that, Han goes to the stand and picks a wooden spear for himself, causing Wei Chen to ask if he likes the spear. Agreeing, Han states that he likes the refreshing wind it creates when he swings it and the sound it makes as well. Hearing that, Wei Chen remembers his ability to judge and adapt that he showed with John and Del, considering it to be extraordinary, thinking that he must have lived through extreme circumstances. Wei Chen smiles, realizing that aside from being unfortunate, he has the potential. Therefore, he turns to Han, wishing him the best of luck and stating that he will be helping him in the training process. Hearing that, Han smiles and looks at the spear, determined to learn as much as he can from the training. 2 weeks later, while Han's busy sparring with his classmate, he remarks that his classmate is looking tired and ends the battle by surrendering. In response, his classmate states that he seems to be the one trying to buy time and rest. With that, he brings the spear close to Han, attempting to launch an attack. But Han quickly blocks it and launches a counter-attack, leaving Joyce surprised. Following that, he causes Joyce to drop his spear and lose against him. Accepting his defeat, Joyce states that he learned a lot from him and wants him to become the class representative after he ascends to C class the next week. In response, Han states that he cannot become the class representative only because he wants to. However, Joyce states that everyone will be following him, revealing that they have already decided it amongst themselves, causing him to smile in response and thank them, thinking that becoming a class representative can make him one step closer to moving to the next class. Han goes to John to discuss it, who refuses to make him the class representative. The next day, one of the psykers sitting in the gym discusses John, mentioning that John has a very bad temper and has defeated him countless times. Remembering those challenging days, they continue their exercises when another person comes running to inform them about John's battle against a first-year student. Meanwhile, on the training ground, Han stands with a pointed stick in his hand, facing John, who charges his hand with his combustion ability and lights a cigarette. Watching from the dormitory windows, senior students encourage Han to defeat John, eagerly anticipating the battle. Hearing their comments, John feels annoyed, while Han stands confidently before him, anger in his eyes. He remembers the previous night when John had come to their room asking if the rest of his classmates wanted to let someone like him, who couldn't even use telekinesis properly, lead them. In response, all his classmates remain silent, prompting John to suggest they must have a reason to appoint him, calling out to Han. He broke a mop and hurled its stick towards him, while Han caught it in confusion. John mentioned hearing that Han was the best in combat in his class and challenged him to spar to showcase his skills, causing Han to remark that the edge of the stick was very sharp. Hearing that, John asked if Han expected him to get injured by the spearmanship of a novice like him, and he disagreed. Remembering this, Han looks at John, who throws away his shirt, ready for the battle. Confused, Han asks if John intends to fight him barehanded, to which John agrees, freezing, stating he won't take the fight with the child seriously. Throwing away the cigarette, he explains that Han will win if he makes any part of his body aside from his feet touch the ground, causing Han to ask about the conditions for him to lose. In response, John says that Han has to admit defeat in order to lose, prompting Han to smile and claim he will lose in that case. With that, the battle begins, and Han swings his spear, ready to launch an attack, while John stands defensively, waiting for the attack. As they watch, the other students become confused, wondering if they are fighting for real and remarking that it would be impossible for a child to defeat a powerful instructor. Hearing their remarks, Del, who is passing by, tells them to move aside and comes to the window, watching Han and remarking that he is crazy. Meanwhile, Han launches countless attacks, all of which John effortlessly blocks with his bare body. After blocking the attacks for some time, John takes action, grabbing Han by his clothes and launching a forceful kick into his stomach, causing intense pain. As Han crashes to the ground from the hit, John raises his foot, preparing to strike again, but Han dodges the attack and moves backward, regaining his balance. Shocked by the fierce attack, Han thinks that John intended to kill him with that move. Observing Han's expressions, John remarks that his face reveals that dragons and minions plot everything, regardless of their opponent's strength. He explains that monsters never go easy on anyone just because they are weak. Hearing this, Han calls out to him, asking if he is going to fight with words, surprising John. Rushing toward Han to launch another attack, John notes Han's determination to keep going. Grabbing Han's shirt again, John swings him up in the air and throws him, causing Han to crash to the ground from a distance. Just then, John notices a cut on his face, wondering when Han managed to inflict it. Meanwhile, all the other students continue to encourage Han to defeat John as he charges forward once again. Realizing he needs to be vigilant, John stands still, while Han quickly moves behind him. Leaping up to launch an attack, John barely manages to dodge after dodging a few more similar attacks. John realizes that Han is using momentum and centrifugal force to attack and understands why Wei Chen likes him. Smiling, he thinks that he has also started to take a liking to Han. Meanwhile, Han charges forward at great speed once again and launches an attack. In response, John stands still, deciding to face it head-on. But to his shock, the attack is so fierce that it causes the wooden stick to pierce through his body, enraging him. Grabbing Han by the neck, he decides to put an end to the fight and raises him up in the air, telling him to surrender, which causes Han to experience intense agony. Watching him endure the pain, the other children remarked that he is going too far. Meanwhile, John tells him to surrender if he wants to remain alive and charges his hand with his combustion ability. However, despite the increasing torture, Han refuses to give up and keeps screaming in pain. At that moment, Wei Chen comes running to them, asking if John intends to kill Han and telling him to stop. John, stating that Han has not surrendered and he himself is not lost, becomes confused and asks what to do in that case. Lifting Han up from the ground, Wei Chen turns to John, stating that he has gotten fed up with Ark's way of education. In response, John is silent for some time and then tells him to be quiet, moving away. He states that since Han did not surrender, he will consider it his victory, remarking that Wei Chen can't train them by always protecting them. John states that since Han overcame the trial by himself and proved his skill, he will be promoted to Class B after healing. Upon hearing his promotion to Class B, one of John's comrades becomes surprised. John explains that this update will soon be posted on the promotion list, causing his comrade to ask if the superiors will allow the promotion from Class D to Class B. In response, John states that Han is already good enough to be promoted to Class A, with only his psychic potential holding him back. However, his comrade argues that the superiors prioritize psychic potential above everything else, leading John to remark that their standards are useless. According to him, What one needs to defeat a dragon is not psychic ability but a strong mentality to the weapon under extreme fear. In that aspect, he considers Han to have the greatest potential to become a striker and deems him too valuable a talent to let rot just because he is a late psychic bloomer. He further states that Han even has the capability to become the savior of the world, leaving his comrades surprised and asking if he didn't use to dislike him. Disagreeing, John states that he rather likes Han, which surprises his comrade. On the 7th day of hospitalization, Han's instructor, Wei Chen, comes to check up on him but keeps standing outside the door, and he, causing the doctor to ask if he will not go in. Looking at the basket in his hand, she inquires about its contents, shows her the fruits and milk inside, explaining that they are for Han. Observing this, she asks why Wei Chen is just standing outside, and he points to Han inside the room practicing telekinesis, stating that he does not want to distract him. Meanwhile, Han continues to apply his internal energy to the ball placed in front of him, attempting to lift it. As they watch with curiosity, Han successfully transfers his energy to the ball, bringing joy to Wei Chen and the doctor. Wei remarks on Han's amazing concentration, then goes inside with the doctor and calls out to Han. Happy to see his instructor, Han says he is all right. Taking his seat, Wei Chen tells him that he has brought some snacks for him, handing over the fruits and milk. Wei mentions that Han will be returning as a student of Class B the next day and expresses astonishment at Han working on his telekinesis skill all this time. Han explains that his psychic grade is below average, so he wants to be proficient in its use before getting discharged. Wei Chen praises this decision, stating that all psykers should be able to use telekinesis to some extent, even if they excel in armed combat. Wei further explains that since most battles of psykers occur in the air, telekinesis will help retrieve a dropped weapon during combat. Getting a wonderful idea, Wei Chen goes to the reception to request permission to take Han outside for a short time. After receiving permission, he takes Han to the gym, leaving him confused. Wei Chen explains that given his psychic development speed, it is highly unlikely that Han will ever manifest a unique ability. Chen adds that Han cannot even dream of having abilities like combustion or teleportation if he continues on this path, shocking Han. In that case, Wei suggests that Han hone his telekinesis skill to the utmost limit and make it his unique ability. While Han finds the idea of specializing in telekinesis appealing, Chen reveals that telekinesis is like muscles becoming stronger with use in training. Chen emphasizes that the ranks based on psychic ability are delusions, and Han possesses a regeneration ability even greater than theirs. Therefore, he encourages Han to never give up and to keep training. The next day, Han stands at the door of the B class, feeling a little nervous before entering, taking a deep breath. He is about to enter the class when someone opens the door and comes out, causing him to collide with Han. Confused, the boy looks at him, holding his nose, and recognizes him, making Han surprised, stating that everyone in the class already knows him. The boy introduces himself as Dmitry Vladimirovich Petra, the representative of Class B, shaking hands with him. Han asks if he will have to use his complicated name every time they talk, to which the boy tells him to call him Dmitry, stating that they have been given free time for arm sparring. Dmitry tells Han to follow him and takes him to the gym. At the gym, Han thinks that armed combat is his favorite type of training, allowing him to release stress from the strict curriculum, his lack of psychic ability, and the fear of expulsion. Therefore, he picks up a spear from the stand and goes towards his classmates, defeating all of them with his swift moves within an instant. However, while doing that, he wonders if it is fun to bully others and looks at Kiro, his friend, sitting on the ground trembling with fear, thinking that his specialty is his psychic ability. While Kiro looks at him in confusion, Han wonders if it is fine to take advantage of the weaknesses of others, looking at all of his classmates lying on the ground. He tells them to be grateful that they were not sparring during an actual training session. Watching him, Dmitry becomes surprised, thinking that he was expecting Han to show such power and a desire to fight him for real. A few moments earlier, Kiro was lying on the ground with his wooden sword in front of him, when one of his classmates approached him, telling him to attack, pushing him away. The second classmate stepped forward, stating that it was now his turn, while Kiro remained on the ground, calling for help as his classmates continued to line up to torture him. Kiro felt his strength continuously waning all the while calling for help. Remembering Han, his only friend who had saved him. Just then, Han appeared from behind, holding a spear and began knocking all of them down one by one. Recalling this, Kiro looks at Han with astonishment, wondering if he's even a real human being, and calls out to express his gratitude. Meanwhile, Han asks Dimitri if this is how Class B conducts its sparring. In response, Dimitri explains that this is how things work at art, emphasizing that their enemies don't go easy on them just because they're weak. Dimitri refers to Han as the odd one in the class who helps the weak instead of attacking them. He explains that blindly helping Kiro will only lead to his death, causing Han to become frustrated. However, he still considers it a little unfair for three people to gang up against a weak person. Considering that, he turns to Han, stating that they should show them what a true spar is like. Hearing this, Han tightens his grip on his spear and asks if Dimitri really wants to fight. After a few moments, Dimitri leaps into the air and launches a forceful attack, which Han blocks with his spear. Considering the power of the attack, he thinks that the spear is going to break if he tries to block such an attack. Once again, therefore, he swings his spear, deciding to parry him and make him lose his balance. With that, he launches a strike on Dimitri's leg, stating that the battle will now be over. However, instead of falling to the ground, Dimitri maintains his balance, dodges the next attack, and gets closer, hitting Han with his head. This causes Han to crash to the ground, remarking that such tricks aren't permissible during arm sparring. Dimitri reveals that he has been learning a powerful Russian martial art since he could walk, and he warns Han that his sword isn't the only thing he should be concerned about. Getting back on his feet, Han asks if Dimitri intends to defeat the dragon with his martial arts as well. In response, Dimitri states that he could try to strangle the dragon with his skills if things go wrong. Meanwhile, all the other classmates support Dimitri, referring to him as the tiger cub of Siberia, which makes Dimitri overconfident. As Han observes them conversing, he realizes that despite their harsh words, their intentions aren't malicious. He feels a strong bond among them with Dimitri at its center, and looks at Kiro standing aside, lowering his head, realizing that he's an outcast in his class. While Han's looking at Kiro, Dimitri calls out to him, reminding him not to ignore his opponent during the fight. This prompts Han to turn around quickly and block Dimitri's attack, thinking that he shouldn't prolong the fight. Han stands facing Dimitri, who moves forward to launch another attack, striking his spear onto the ground. Han jumps upward, believing that this attack will be enough to defeat Dimitri. To everyone's astonishment, Dimitri comes down at great speed and launches an attack. However, instead of retaliating, Dimitri simply strikes Han's spear with his sword and breaks it, leaving Han wondering the reason behind this act. At that moment, Dimitri swiftly moves, in holding Han up and slams him onto the ground with his martial arts skill. Tightening his grip on Han's arm, Dimitri warns him to surrender if he doesn't want to lose his arm and begins to pull it, causing Han to experience intense pain. Trembling with pain, Han challenges Dimitri to break his arm if he has the guts to do it, which infuriates Dimitri, taking it as a challenge. Dimitri indeed breaks Han's arm, leaving all his classmates in shock as he lies on the ground feeling intense pain. Dimitri states that he already told him to surrender, causing Kiro's eyes to well up with tears. Turning around, Dimitri tells Han not to cry with his broken arm, and looks back at him, standing behind him, instructing their other classmates to take him to the infirmary. However, just then Han strikes Dimitri on the head with a stick, remarking that everyone he has encountered before must have cried when their arms were broken, looking at him lying on the ground. Han challenges him to continue the match and looks at his broken stick, while Dimitri gives a thumbs up on his effort and loses consciousness. After some time, Dimitri regains consciousness and finds himself in a hospital room. Hearing the sound of a notification, he turns around and finds Han sitting beside him with his broken arm, checking a video message he has received. The message is from Major Kong, the person who sent him to Ark, expressing appreciation for his performance and sharing a video of his siblings going to school. Overwhelmed with happiness upon seeing his siblings living a good life and gaining weight, Han calls out to Dimitri, asking if he can swipe through the photos, to which Dimitri agrees. While Dimitri is swiping through the photos in his album, he becomes annoyed and questions why he has to do that. Han replies that it's because he is the one who has broken his arm. In response, Dimitri states that He is also responsible for cracking his head by attacking like a coward, but Han replies that it was his fault to let his guard down, causing him to feel annoyed. Stating that he was only angry that day, Han clarifies that he has no bad feelings towards him, and Dmitri replies the same along with a desire to fight with him until the end next time. Thinking something, Han states that he feels like he made a mistake against Kiro that day by starting to fight instead of extending his hand towards him. Stating that he understands his feelings, Dmitri reveals that he will immediately die when he reaches level 2, making Han confused about its reason. Leaving the room, they begin walking down the corridor, with Han repeatedly asking where they are heading. Dmitri instructs him to see for himself and leads him to the emergency medical center, explaining that it's a place where he will stay as long as he is still breathing. Suddenly, they pass a stretcher carrying a badly injured psyker from Ark, leaving Han shocked by the person's condition. Dmitri urges Han to consider how challenging their training will be based on what they have witnessed. Puzzled, Han asks if the people on higher levels are not of the same age. Noting that the injured person appears to be an adult instructor, Dmitri reveals that those who reach level 2 receive medication to accelerate their physical growth, to prepare for battling dragons, as the association won't wait for them to fully mature. Instead of being shocked, Han finds this concept intriguing, making Dmitri surprised. Han states that he always wanted to become an adult since he had to do all sorts of things to survive, including street thefts. As a result of doing those things, he had to fight against the attackers who tortured him brutally and always overpowered him because of their huge figures. Remembering whatever he has faced, Han states that he does not want a happy childhood, and that the only thing that matters to him is survival. Hearing that, Dmitri remarks that he has the strongest mentality in Ark. In response, Han lowers his head, suggesting that they should go back. The next day, John informs them that they will begin airborne training, instructing them to apply what they have learned. While wearing their training suits, Dmitri remarks to Han that undergoing such rigorous training right after leaving the hospital makes him remember the hospital beds. In response, Han smiles and looks at the huge bag, which is part of their suit, stating that it seems to have a lot of food inside. Considering such a large number of belongings, Han states that the training does not seem to be simple airborne training. Looking at some of the students who have already opened their rations and are eating, Dmitri becomes annoyed. Suddenly noticing someone, Dmitri calls out to Han, telling him to look at this student standing beside them. Hearing that, Han looks at Del, wearing his suit, while Dmitri remarks that he is the last remaining genius from England and states that he really wants to fight the boy. Hearing their murmurs, Del turns to them, finding Dmitri staring at him with a cold expression on his face. Meanwhile, Han looks at Kiro sitting at a distance, looking at his ration bag, and wonders what the purpose of that might be. Just then, John calls out to them, telling them to quickly get on board. Wearing their helmets, all of them quickly get up and run towards the helicopter in front of them. After they all get inside, the helicopter starts to move away, and John turns to the other instructors, stating that they should also proceed. Remembering Han is always being the one who came to help and fight for him, Kuro hangs from the tree with his parachute stuck in the branches and cries desperately. Having been stuck for a considerable amount of time, he believes that Han may not come to save him this time. 1 hour earlier, while the helicopters were moving above the ocean, the children sat with anxiety and looked outside, wondering how far they would be taken. Just then, John connected to their wristwatches and informed them that they were currently above a deserted island, where they would descend and begin survival training. John explained the island for that they would find 2 days' worth of rations inside their bags and would have to survive on the deserted 2 days. Upon hearing this, all the children were shocked by this sudden announcement of survival training out of the blue. While they all felt scared, Dmitri reassured them that it would be fun like camping. Just then, John informed them that their instructors would be coming to the island within 1 week and they would have to survive until then, causing further anxiety among them. After some time, John and the other instructors reached the island and rescued the children who had fallen into the ocean after jumping out of the helicopters. After pulling out one of the children, John turned to the other instructor and asked if he was the last of them. In response, the instructor confirmed that there were no other children who had fallen out, and he informed John that some children had already formed groups of 7. John remarked that just because they were children, it didn't mean they were innocent, and they were just like adults. According to John, these children would value strength as soon as they felt out of control, and instead of starving together, they would start stealing each other's rations. Meanwhile, inside the island, one of the children stood holding a stick, having knocked out one of his peers just to steal his ration. Opening the child's ration bag, they noticed that he hadn't even touched the food and began taking it out. While another child instructed them to save some for the leader, just then Carl, one of the children acting as their leader, turned to them, stating that he had instructed them to gather as much as possible before sunset, but not to share the food with others. Instead, he suggested that by grouping up and stealing like that, no one would be able to oppose them. All of them agreed, becoming excited to challenge Dimitri and Han, believing that with their collaboration, they could even face Del Simon. Carl then heard a voice calling for help and turned around, asking if his team members had also heard it. Taking their belongings, they started to move in the direction of the voice, considering this person their next target. Meanwhile, Han, who had fallen into the ocean, walked out of the water, completely soaked, realizing that falling into the ocean had wasted a lot of his time. As he looked at the island, he realized it was very open, and he needed to find a sheltered place. While walking, he thought that for children who had never experienced starvation, the ration meant to last for only 2 days would be insufficient. He knew that when desperate from hunger, they might try to steal food from others, and he wondered if children like Del Simon had ever experienced hunger. Meanwhile, Del, who was also walking on the island, suddenly came face to face with Dimitri and asked why he was following him. In response, Dimitri challenged him to a fight, but Del simply turned around and started walking, stating that he didn't want to waste his strength. Hearing that, Dimitri tried to stop him, explaining that he didn't mean any harm and only wanted to spar, which left Del surprised and wondering if Dimitri was insane. Thinking that it might have been too soon to ask, Dimitri suggested that they should become friends first and then spar, but Del found him annoying and walked away. Meanwhile, Carl and his group tracked the sound and finally reached the tree where Kiro was hanging, asking for help. Carl commented that hanging from the tree suited Kiro, took his ration back, and walked away with his group without helping him down. Watching them leave, Kiro requested that they at least lower him down if they wanted the bag, but Carl told him to be thankful for being spared and to wait to be rescued by the instructors. They laughed and walked, leaving Kiro to cry, thinking they were cruel. As day turns into night, Kiro continues to hang from the tree, crying continuously, and thinking about his classmates, mocking him for shedding tears over trivial matters. He lets out a loud scream, overcome by hunger and desperation, with his vision blurred from starvation. He suddenly begins to see a shadow resembling Han approaching him, which surprises him before he loses consciousness. However, the shadow turns out to be his imagination and disappears right after he loses consciousness. The next morning, while he is still hanging from the tree unconscious, Han arrives at the scene for real and watches him, becoming shocked. After some time, Han sits outside a camp he made, holding a stick. When Kiro suddenly emerges from the camp, surprised to see him, Han turns to him and smiles, asking if he is awake. While Kiro stares at him with astonishment, giving half of his food to Kiro, Han tells him to have it, stating that it is his breakfast. Han mentions that he didn't get a chance to recover his backpack, so they should just share the food he has. Thinking that the quantity of food is very little to feed one person, Kiro is about to say that he doesn't want to become a burden to him. However, because he's starving, he is unable to refuse the food and starts to eat, thanking Han for the favor while crying desperately. In response, Han tells him to finish the food so that they can go out and find water. Meanwhile, certain surveillance cameras roam around throughout the island, capturing footage of all the children busy exploring the area. While John sits in his room, watching the footage, Octo comes to him, asking if he found someone interesting. In response, John states that there is a child who has gone crazy and points to the footage, telling him to look. Meanwhile, one of the children remarks that a week on a deserted island is ludicrous and that they just have to survive somehow. Therefore, he makes a raft and goes to the ocean in order to return to Ark. Meanwhile, Han and Kiro reach the ocean and look into the water, wondering if it will be drinkable. To check it, Han takes some of the water in a bottle and drinks it, declaring it drinkable, and tells Kiro to drink as much as he can and take some with him. After taking the water, they hurry back to shelter, remarking that it is hard to travel during the day because of the intense heat. While walking, Han thinks that they will need more food if they have to spend the entire week with just the two of them. However, looking around, he doesn't seem to find anything edible and wonders if this is the reason the others are stealing food. When Kiro suddenly notices something, becoming surprised, while Han is about to walk away, Kiro suddenly stops him. That it is a trap, causing him to step on a twig, revealing a large hole in the ground. Astonished by Kiro's ability to find out the trap, Han turns to him, asking how he found it out. While Kiro hesitates in responding, Han asks if he saw the trap, and he agrees, while feeling a little shy and nervous. As Kiro goes on to explain what type of trap it was, Han realizes that Kiro's unique ability has activated, which is something like short-term foresight, a very superior and rare ability. Walking away, Han wonders if the extreme conditions on the island worked as a stimulant for Kiro and considers this training to be a fantastic opportunity for him to prove his abilities. Meanwhile, Carl and his group members reach Han's camp. Looking inside, they find 2 plates of breakfast, realizing that there are 2 people who have taken their belongings with them, leaving nothing behind. As Carl turns around after having a look inside the camp, one of his group members asks if they should destroy the place. However, he disagrees, stating that those living in the camp have not permanently left it and will come back soon. Therefore, he decides that they will come back later and attack them while they are resting. After some time, Kiro and Han return to the camp, with Kiro feeling utterly exhausted and wanting to rest as they are about to enter the camp. Han notices something and tells Kiro to stop, revealing that someone came in their absence. He explains that the stone he left is an indicator above the camp is now lying on the ground, along with the footprints of multiple people near the tent, in case they are a group of people. Han states that they will definitely return to steal from them and suggests taking the parachute trap and moving on. Therefore, despite being tired, they open up their tent and start to move away. Looking at the surroundings getting darker, Han states that they need to find a suitable place to stay before it gets any darker. Turning to Kiro, he asks if there is anything he can see, but Kiro replies that something seems strange and he feels like his eyes are closing. Confused, Han calls out to him, but Kiro moves into a state of trance and starts viewing a gigantic leopard in front of them, fighting with Han. Realizing what is about to happen, Kiro opens his eyes and forcefully pushes Han away, causing him to crash to the ground, when a leopard suddenly jumps on the spot where Han was standing. Looking at the leopard, Han becomes shocked and looks at his stick lying at a distance, realizing that there is no way he can fight against the beast barehanded. Just then, the leopard opens its mouth to attack him, and Han closes his eyes, anticipating the deadly strike. However, before it can do that, a strong wave of energy strikes the leopard, causing it to fall at a distance. Surprised, Han turns around to find Joyce, one of his classmates, asking if he is all right. Looking at Joyce, Han becomes surprised when Joyce comes to them and asks if Kiro is also accompanying him. Han, looking at his injured leg, asks what happened, and Joyce reveals that he was caught in a trap set up by someone and can barely stand up. Crashing to the ground because of his injured leg, he states that he is glad he found them. Hearing about the trap, Kiro turns to Han, reminding him that they also came across one earlier. And Han agrees, stating that both of those were probably set up by the same people. Realizing that there is a group of students who are stealing the ration bags, Joyce states that he does not have any such belongings in the first place. Hearing that, Han becomes surprised and asks where his ration bags went, and Joyce reveals that when his leg got injured, he ate all of them to avoid anyone stealing it from him. Remarking that he's stupid, Han states that they should try to find a shelter first. As the night grows darker, Carl sits in another part of the forest, with all of his group members asleep. He remembers that one day his father told him about the sensors reacting when he passed under them, stating that he seems to have a psychic ability. Considering it a good opportunity, his father told him to join ARC, but he argued that he was in the middle of shooting a movie. Annoyed by his response, his father explained that if he manages to become a psyker, he will not have to pursue his acting career anymore and will be able to obtain fame and riches. His father explained that when the war would be over, the psykers would become warriors of the nation, and because of being superhuman, he could rule over everyone. In this way, his father finally convinced him to join ARC, and he came to the place despite feeling annoyed at his father's intervention in his career. The morning, Dmitri is busy doing calisthenics exercises while Del watches him from behind. Looking at him exerting a lot of stamina, Del asks if he has this much energy to spare and states that they do not have much left to eat, asking how he will last for the remaining 5 days. In response, Dmitri states that he is a physical type and needs to train in order to become an elite striker, causing Del to remark that psykers need their abilities to fight and not strength. Hearing that, Dmitri remembers Han stating that he was the only one with the ability to take him on in armed combat. In response, Del becomes surprised and asks if he has fought with Han before, and Dmitri smiles, thinking that he has taken the bait because of Han and might get ready to spar. Meanwhile, in a cave hidden between the trees, Han wakes Kiro and Joyce up, stating that they should stay together for the remainder of the training period, stating that he and Kiro will go and bring some food and firewood. Han tells Joyce to stay back and guard their shelter, and he complies. Appreciating his combustion ability, Han thanks Joyce for his help, stating that it is because of him that they have an advantage in survival training. Reaching the ocean, Han looks at the fish swimming in water, and states that having fire can give them the privilege to enjoy foods like that. Hearing that, Kiro asks if he knows how to fish, stating that they do not even have any equipment for that. In response, Han looks at him and smiles, thanking him and making him confused. Han explains that this thanks is for saving him when he was in danger the previous day and finding them a safe cave to stay in. Han states that he thought helping him would be the best course of action, but found out that it could not like that and could not find a solution. However, he states that after landing on the island he has come to realize Kiro is indeed a genius psychic. Han tells Kiro that he possesses the strength to defend himself and save his friends, and by depending on each other, they are going to last through this because they are friends. These words make Kiro remember the time when he was just a nameless child in an orphanage in Japan and was given the name Kiro just because of his dark skin. Remembering the time when everyone used to criticize him for his nature and appearance, Kiro becomes overwhelmed, realizing that he has finally found a friend who believes in him. Meanwhile, Han explains to him the strategy of how they are going to catch the fish, and Kiro bends down towards the water, activating his ability of short-term foresight. After successfully finding the location of the fish underwater, Kiro uses telekinesis to bring the fish out of the water, repeating the process again and again. They are able to catch a lot of fish, which is sufficient to fulfill their needs. On the 3rd day of training, Han and Kiro are able to catch 8 fish because of Kiro's ability and happily walk towards the cave. Thinking that Joyce will be very happy to see them, as they reach the cave, they start to feel scorching hot rays coming in their direction. Realizing something, Han tells Kiro to stay there and quickly moves toward the cave. Finding the cloth covering the cave to be burned, wondering what might have happened, Han enters the cave and finds Joyce lying unconscious on the ground, throwing a wooden sword in Del's direction. Dmitri tells him to catch it. Catching the sword, Del becomes surprised and asks why he packed up his weapons even for the airborne training. Dmitri, stating that he was thinking of fighting with 2 swords instead of 1, asks why Del agreed to spar with him. In response, Del states that if he really fought with Han on fair terms, it must be Dmitri who is going to be promoted to Class A, and he wants to check if he is capable or not. Hearing that, Dmitri smiles, stating that he likes Del's attitude. With that, they charge at each other and start the battle. While Del leans downward, Dmitri leaps up to launch an attack, feeling a little anxious because of Del's ability. As both of them reach near each other, Del brings his sword straight to Dmitri's chest and hits it, leaving him surprised. Dmitri quickly retaliates, swinging his sword swiftly, causing Del to drift backward. Thinking it's in his favor, Dmitri runs towards Del and starts the battle once again, launching countless strikes, some of which hit Del and cause him a little pain. However, after managing to block most of the strikes, Del reveals his true ability and attacks him with very quick speed, leaving Dmitri utterly bewildered. Barely managing to block the attacks, Dmitri considers it better to maintain a distance and tries to do so when Del launches another close-range attack. In order to save himself, Dmitri quickly leans backward and, while lying on the ground, swiftly swings his sword, causing Del to drop his weapon. Quickly regaining his balance, Dmitri stands up, stating that the battle will now be over, and charges at Del to launch an attack. However, As soon as he reaches him, Del uses telekinesis to assist in bringing his sword towards him, hitting Dimitri's head and causing him to crash to the ground. Stating that it would have been his victory if it were armed combat, Del reminds him that they are psykers. And for them, their abilities are more important than physicality. However, he still becomes surprised by the results of the battle, wondering if Han is even stronger than Dimitri. Meanwhile, Han lifts Joyce up, telling him to open his eyes. To this, Joyce speaks up, assuring him that he is fine. Lighting up the fire, they helped Joyce lean against the wall in a comfortable position and ask who did that to him. In response, Joyce reveals that it was Carl and his gang comprised of 7 members who took away all of their food, stating that they will come back to the cave again. Joyce suggests quickly moving their shelter to some other place. Stating that he will not let the people who pick on his friends go away so easily, Han says that they should temporarily look for some other shelter. In order to seek revenge, Han shares his plan to ambush them when the sun goes down. At night, Han and Kiro sit outside the cave, looking at the children guarding the place and find out that Carl and his group have taken the cave as their shelter as they expected. Turning to Kiro, Han states that they will begin when he is ready, and Kiro agrees. Han says that it would not be possible for him alone, but if Kiro is with him, they can definitely take down all those children. Thinking that Han is the only person who believes in him, Kiro vows to never disappoint him no matter what and activates his telekinesis ability. Lifting a stone from the ground and lifting multiple stones in this manner, Kiro throws them in the direction of the cave, causing them to hit the children standing outside, and making them bewildered. Hearing the voices of his group members, Carl becomes confused and starts to move out of the cave. Meanwhile, the children standing outside locate the place where the stones are coming from and start running in its direction while dodging the stones. Being able to clearly see their path, Kiro starts to hit them with more and more stones, making them confused. While they are busy saving themselves from the stones, Han comes out, finally holding a stick and starts to hit them one by one, causing all of them to crash to the ground. When Carl comes out, surprised to see Han, Carl keeps standing still while Han points his stick towards him, ready to seek revenge. Looking at Han, Carl is astonished by the fact that he took down 6 of his group members on his own, considering it unbelievable. He states that he can't be alone and asks about the identity of the second group member. In response, Han calls out to Kiro, stating that he can come out since dealing with Carl is something he can do on his own. Realizing that they are beaten by 2 losers, one of whom is Kiro, Carl becomes frustrated. Meanwhile, Han declares that they have come to avenge Joyce and states that this is a real fight in which he will not go easy on him. Stating that he can't tolerate this any longer, Carl picks up a stick from the ground, vowing to crush Han, stating that he can try if he wants. Han also grabs his stick tightly, rushing forward. Carl leaps up, attempting to launch an attack while Han keeps standing still, holding his stick. However, as soon as Carl reaches near him, he slightly moves his stick, causing it to hit Carl's face and crash him to the ground. Annoyed by the sudden retaliation, Carl attempts to hit him once again, which Han effortlessly dodges and hits Carl's stomach with his stick, causing him intense pain. Asking if it is painful, Han tells him to brace himself, stating that it is only the beginning. Overwhelmed with anger, Carl quickly turns to him, telling him to stop showing off and tries to launch another attack, yet receives the same kind of retaliation. After being hit multiple times, Carl finally drops his stick and crashes to the ground, feeling immense pain. Realizing that he has been defeated, Carl considers it impossible, wondering how strong Han is. Meanwhile, Han speaks up, stating that Joyce is already very injured and asking if it is necessary to go that far and torture him more. Meanwhile, Carl grabs some sand in his hand from the ground, telling Han not to look down on him. He remembers that he was considered a genius and a famous actor in Germany, and his father took advantage of his fame for political gain and obtained many things in the process. However, there was no end to his greed, and he wanted him to become a psyker even if he needed to drag others down for that. Stating that he did not come all the way up here just to be stopped by a person like him, Carl throws the sand in Han's eyes, causing his vision to get blurry. Taking advantage of the situation, he launches a forceful punch at Han's face, causing him to go flying backward. Watching that, Kiro becomes shocked and runs towards him when Carl gives him a threatening gaze, telling him not to come any closer. Scared by his gaze, Kiro stops on his way and watches Carl hit Han badly, causing him to crash to the ground once again and lose consciousness. Getting up, Carl holds his stick, stating that he will never let anyone climb over him again, and is about to hit Han with it when a stone comes flying and hits his face. Enraged, he turns around, finding Kiro using telekinesis, while telling him to get away from Han. Carl asks if Kiro is also trying to climb over him. Carl goes near him and grabs him from his clothes, stating that he never liked him from the beginning, and a useless person like him should have been kicked out from the beginning. Carl is about to hit him when Han gets up. Punching his face, Han causes him to crash to the ground and asks if he considers himself useful, highlighting that he only believes in numbers and hides behind his group members. Han states that all the people, including Del Simon, Dimitri, Joyce, and Kiro, are better than him, and that in order to climb up, he will have to eliminate all of them. This causes Carl to become a little anxious and frightened. Stating that he is nothing, Han brings the sharp end of his stick down beside him and pierces it into the ground, sparing him while he keeps lying on the ground. Han states that everyone has a reason to climb up and he needs to find another way for that, warning him against harming his friends again. Sometime later, Carl starts to talk to himself, stating that he never wanted to become a psyker in the first place and starts to laugh. After returning to Joyce, all three of them spend the rest of their days on the deserted island with enjoyment. When finally the rescue helicopters arrive, looking at the helicopters, Joyce states that he never wants to have this experience again, and Han laughs. All the other children who are gathered in one place call out to Han, Kiro, and Joyce, thanking them for providing them with food. They really appreciate the abilities of Kiro and Joyce to catch and cook the fish, which causes them to become a little shy. Pointing towards Han, Joyce states that the person they should be thanking is him because all of that is his idea. Just then, they receive a message on their wristwatches, notifying them that their survival training has ended and appreciating their efforts. Reading the message, Del and Dimitri also become relieved, thinking that it is the first time they have felt glad to hear the voice of their instructor. Just then, John informs them that they will board the helicopters when they are called, making Han confused about what it means. A few moments later, the helicopters start to land on the island, and board the students on the basis of a roll call. John takes Han, Kiro, Del, and Dimitri in his own helicopter and informs them that their training was fully monitored, and because of the anonymous vote, only 4 of them have been chosen. He informs them that it is not ordinary training but a test to find out which of them are the diamonds in the rough that would become the guardians of humanity. Calling out to all 4 of them, John informs them that they have been nominated as candidates for advancement to level 2.